It's All Things Considered, and I'm Dave Lawrence. The Yardbirds were our guests, with both our guest and longtime rhythm guitarist bassist Chris Drea. Yardbirds are returning today without Chris. It's ahead of a weekend of shows in Waikiki at the Blue Note, the group that can lay claim to having had Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, and Jimmy Page as guitarists. And it's a huge thrill to welcome back the guy who kept time for all three of them, original Yardbirds drummer Jim McCarty. Aloha, Jim. Welcome back. How are you?
Hello, Dave. Yeah, fine.
We had a nice chat with Chris. It was really, when I look on YouTube, it appears to be one of the few video interviews of the two of you guys.
Okay. We did it on film, yeah?
Yeah.
I think it was that very tour that he got ill, actually. After he went back to the West Coast, he had a stroke while we were playing. We played a little club in LA, and he had a stroke from the last number. He went off stage and he rested a bit, and then the next night he went on again and he had another stroke. He was due to go back to London the following day after that second gig, and he was in the room next to me, and he rang me up in the morning. He said, I feel really weird. So I said, oh, well, listen, you know, we've got to call an ambulance. They took him straight into hospital. That must have been, a week or two after we saw you.
Yeah, that was the fall of 2011. I think it was October or something.
That was it. That's exactly right, yeah.
Do you keep in contact with him?
Yeah, he's still sort of on board. He's on the phone calling me up. He can't travel, he can't play, but he's had stents in his legs. So it all comes from smoking, really. You know, it's all to do with smoking too much.
Let him know that I was asking about him, sending him some prayers.
Yeah, that's very nice of you.
Thinking about all the cats that have come and gone through your life, prior to meeting Paul Samuel Smith at Hampton School, describe the events that led to you playing the drums.
Well, I was always into pop music, and particularly the American rock music. Buddy Holly and the Everly Brothers, Gene Vincent. We had a school group, actually. Paul Samuel Smith used to play lead guitar. But before that, I was in a thing called the Boys Brigade, semi-military thing, where we wore uniform and marched, and we had a band, and I used to play the snare, and that's how I got into drumming. And I was really hot on people like the Shadows and Elvis and DJ Fontana and Tony Meehan and jazz drummers, Joe Morello and all these people. I always really loved drums.
Well, you've kept it your entire life. Talk about the very beginning, Jim, of the formation of the Yardbirds.
Paul Samuel Smith was always very close. And then when we left school, I bumped into him once, and he said, oh, do you want to go up and see this band? They're playing near us up in Richmond. They're called the Rolling Stones, and they've got this cool singer called Mick Jagger, and they were playing in some little church hall. And he also played to me the Jimmy Reed live at the Carnegie Hall, which I loved. What happened was Paul was in a band with Keith.
Keith Relf, late lead singer and harmonica player from the Yardbirds.
He met Keith in a pub in Kingston, Surrey. That was near where we lived. And all these musicians and sort of bohemians used to hang out there. People like Chris Drea and Keith and Paul had this band. And then I met Topham and Chris, and we started another band. And then it was Paul's idea. He wanted to get the two bands together because his and Keith's band were a bit too folky, and they wanted to rock it up a bit. And they knew I was a rock drummer, you know, from the school group. We basically united the two bands. And the first date we played was in the interval for Cyril Davis.
He was a historic guy as one of the pioneers of that blues harmonica in England.
Well, he was, and he got for his backing band Screaming Lord Sutch's band. They were all rockers. So he was playing blues with this rock band, and they were great. It's a bit like we did. We combined blues and rock and started doing all the covers, all the Howling Wolf and Jimmy Reed and Bo Diddley, all that stuff. And we started getting these sort of quite rare albums that you couldn't find anywhere except in sort of a couple of jazz shops in London.
Who named it the Yardbirds?
Keith had the idea to call it the Yardbirds from like On the Road Again, Jack Kerouac.
Right.
And the Yardbirds were the guys that used to bum lifts on steam trains and live in the rail yards. Quite funny for us because we were all young guys from suburbs of London.
By the time that Five Live Yardbirds' first album was released, December 1964, original guitarist Top had been replaced by Eric Clapton.
Yeah, Eric had been at the art school with Keith and Chris, so he had a reputation already. He was a guy that sort of knew he had a reputation as soon as you met him. He was a bit sort of big-headed or whatever. So I didn't really like him very much. I thought, oh, this guy reckons himself, But I'd got to like him eventually because he was quite a funny guy.
Yeah, he was a cat in demand, so I can imagine that some of those dudes must have come with a little bit of extra baggage as you're describing.
Well, yeah, that's right. But he was very, give him his due, he was very dedicated. And he would be up in the morning practicing and 8 o'clock in the morning or something.
What an impact that record had. The musical style was really significant. It introduced the long jams, the instrumental improvisation.
Yeah, we liked to do that. That was fun. That was sort of part of our thing. Paul was very influenced by the Cyril Davis band. He liked the bass player. And I think the bass player used to do those double-up things. And Paul made that double-up thing a part of our sound. We'd play a song and then do this big build-up. Became known as the rave-up. And then go very quiet. It was all to get the crowd going and to get excitement going while we played.
Like building a climax is the rave-up thing.
Yeah.
And reworking American blues and R&B numbers, Smokestack Lightning, Good Morning Schoolgirl, I'm a Man, all of them which would be covered by other people later, and they'd try to do the same thing, but you guys did it first.
Yeah, we were just trying to make it our own, I guess.
He was in the group a little less than 2 years, but a story that you recall from when Eric was in the band.
He was a very moody guy. He wanted to do his own thing. He could be quite difficult. We played once at a gig in Wales, which was a really rough place, a miner's town, and they were all men. And after about 5 or 10 minutes, they all started a big fight amongst themselves. And the promoter said to us, whatever you do, don't stop, just keep playing. So we were playing all this sort of brave-up stuff, too much monkey business. And these guys were beating the hell out of each other, and they were chasing each other behind us on the stage and all that. And Eric played on and on.
I can just picture it. You describe it well. That's a good story for radio.
Yeah. He used to change his image all the time. He was a bit of a chameleon. He'd had long hair, and then all of a sudden he had this American crew cut. And he'd turn up in all these Ivy League clothes and have like a trench coat. We were playing with the Beatles at Hammersmith Odeon at their Christmas show, and he was late one time. So he wasn't there. We went on without him. And while we were playing, we saw him walk down the aisle carrying his guitar with his trench coat. We were playing.
Came up and plugged in, or?
No, he just walked down and walked into the dressing room. He was too late.
So you did a gig without Clapton because he just showed up late.
That's mad, isn't it?
Some of the description of him changing his image, being a chameleon, in some ways, at least musically, that has been the side of Jeff Beck, too, who emerged as a recommendation of Jimmy Page, right, to replace him?
Yes, he had complete spontaneous talent. He could just play anything, anytime. When we did Over, Under, Sideways, Down, we had this idea to do a sort of rockabilly. He said, I'll play the bass. He played this real sort of mean bass, rockabilly slap bass. Boogie, doom, 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 doom.
Right.
So we thought, well, what about some sort of riff at the beginning? Then he made that riff up, at the beginning, and it sounded really weird. And I thought, how does this go with this song? It was right off the top of his head, but the more and more you heard it, the more it sort of...
It fit perfect.
Settled in.
That's a fantastic little insight.
It was like Slash's favourite riff, I think.
Slash? His favorite riff?
Slash, his favorite guitar riff.
Do you still remember when you guys filmed the segment for that movie Blow Up, where it actually has the Yardbirds playing Train Kept a Rollin', both Jeff Beck and Jimmy Page together?
Yes, that's funny. It was in a film studio, and what they'd done was they copied a club called the Ricky Tick. So you walked in the studio and you were basically in the club, and that little bit took about 5 days to do that. And we all stayed in this hotel in London so we could be on the set about 8. And he'd have the audience, Antonioni would have the audience all standing there like as if they were completely high, completely out their heads. And that would never happen. The people would all go mad when we played. They wouldn't just stand there like zombies.
5 days just to shoot that one scene.
I know. Actually, I'm doing an autobiography. All these things will be in that book.
When do you plan to have that out?
Probably next year, next spring.
Looking forward to you guys playing. It'll be really nice to see. It'll be a little sad that Chris isn't there, but I'm hoping I can come over and record a short thing, a follow-up with you.
Yeah, do, by all means.
Jim McCarty, Yardbirds legendary drummer, original member. He's telling great stories. I hope you enjoyed talking today, Jim. It's a great thrill to get to talk to you again.
Yeah, I did, Dave. I did enjoy it. Thanks a lot. Aloha, this is Jim McCarty of the Yardbirds with my friend Dave Lawrence. Hey!